The living room was filled with excitement as Sarah and Mike sat on the couch, their hearts racing. In front of them was a small envelope, a symbol of the future they had longed for. Sarah opened it slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a letter that confirmed their adoption application had been accepted. Their dream of becoming parents was finally a reality. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at Mike, who was grinning from ear to ear. They hugged tightly, the joy and anticipation of bringing their child into their lives overwhelming. For years they had tried to conceive but had faced disappointment after disappointment. But now the wait was over. "I can't believe it," Sarah whispered, her voice shaky with emotion. "We're finally going to be parents." Mike nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "We're going to give this child all the love we have." They had always dreamed of raising a child, but they knew that their decision to adopt a black child might not be easy to accept. Still, they were ready for it. They knew that no matter the challenges, their love for their child would be unshakable. The following weekend, Sarah and Mike sat around the dinner table with Sarah's parents, her older brother, and Mike's best friend, Greg. It was time to share their big news. They had been nervous about how their families would react, but they were also excited. This was a decision they had made together, and they couldn't wait to tell everyone. "So, we have some news," Sarah began, smiling at Mike, who squeezed her hand in support. "We're going to adopt a baby." A moment of silence hung in the air as everyone at the table processed what they had just heard. "Adopt?" Sarah's mother asked, her voice filled with surprise. That's wonderful, but why adoption?" "We've been trying for years, Mom," Sarah said, her voice softening. "But we've decided that this is the best way to build our family. We're ready to give a child a loving home." Mike jumped in, eager to explain their decision. "We've already been matched with a child, and we're really excited. He's a little black boy, and we can't wait to bring him home." There was another awkward pause. Mike's best friend, Greg, who had been silent up until this point, shifted in his chair. "Wait, hold on. You're adopting a black child?" he asked, his tone slightly skeptical. Sarah nodded. "Yes, Greg. He's a wonderful child, and he needs a family. We want to give him that." Mike's father, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table, finally spoke up. "I don't know about this," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Are you sure about this? Raising a black child in this neighborhood, it's not going to be easy." Sarah's mother looked at her husband, then at Sarah and Mike, shaking her head. "It's not just about the neighborhood," she said, her voice tight with concern. "What will people think? What about the challenges he'll face? You'll have to explain this to him one day." Mike and Sarah exchanged a look. They knew this wouldn't be easy, but they were committed. "We've thought about all of it," Mike said, his voice steady, "but we believe it's the right thing to do. We love this child already." But the tension in the room grew thicker. The conversations turned uncomfortable, filled with questions and concerns that made the couple feel more and more isolated. As they continued to explain their decision, the smiles faded from their families' faces, replaced with doubt and judgment. After years of failed attempts at having a child of their own, Sarah and Mike were beginning to lose hope. The doctor's appointments, the endless medications, and the unspoken weight of their shared disappointment took its toll on their relationship. But despite the setbacks, they never gave up on their dream of becoming parents. One quiet evening, as they sat together in their cozy living room, Sarah turned to Mike, her eyes filled with determination. "I think it's time we consider adoption," she said softly. Mike looked at her, a mix of surprise and relief washing over him. He had thought about it too, but had never voiced his feelings. "You're right," he said. "I think this is the way we're meant to become parents." It wasn't a decision they made lightly. They spent months researching adoption agencies, attending information sessions, and talking to other families who had adopted children. They knew it would be challenging, but they also knew they had the love and stability to offer a child who needed a family. After much contemplation, they decided to move forward. They submitted their adoption application, hoping and praying for the chance to give a child a better life. And as fate would have it, they were soon matched with a beautiful black boy, just 3 years old. Sarah and Mike had always been close to their families. They celebrated holidays together, spent weekends catching up over family dinners, and supported one another through life's ups and downs. Their families were their world, and they never imagined anything would come between them. But their families were also steeped in traditional values. Sarah's parents, while loving, held on to some old-fashioned beliefs, especially when it came to family and race. They had always imagined Sarah and Mike having children that resembled them, children with light skin and the same family features that had been passed down for generations. Mike's family wasn't much different. While they were open-minded in many ways, they had never been exposed to the complexities of adoption, especially the racial dynamics that came with it. They lived in a small, mostly homogeneous town where diversity was rare. Mike's parents had always believed in the importance of bloodlines and had hoped for grandchildren who would share their own cultural background. The time had come. After months of anticipation, Sarah and Mike were ready to share their news with their families. They had chosen a Sunday afternoon for the big reveal, gathering at Sarah's parents' house for what they hoped would be a joyful occasion. The moment Sarah and Mike sat down to speak, their hands clasped tightly together, everyone's attention shifted. Sarah's heart raced as she spoke the words she had been preparing for so long. "We've been thinking a lot, and we've made a decision," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "After everything we've been through, we've decided to adopt a child." There was a pause. A heavy silence filled the room. Sarah's mother looked at her, her face a mixture of surprise and confusion. "Adopt?" she repeated. "But why adoption, honey?" Mike nodded, trying to ease the tension. "We've been trying for years, but it just wasn't working out. We decided that we still wanted to be parents, and adoption feels like the right choice for us." Sarah's father, who had been quiet until now, leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Adoption is one thing," he said, his tone cautious, "but are you sure you're ready for everything that comes with it? Raising a child from another background is different." The couple exchanged a look, knowing the conversation wasn't going to be easy. But Sarah pressed on, determined to share their excitement. "We've already been matched with a little boy. He's a black child, and we can't wait to bring him into our family," Sarah said, her voice soft but confident. A gasp escaped from her mother's lips. "A black child?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "Are you sure? That's not what we expected. There will be so many challenges. What about the neighborhood? The schools? What will people think?" The room grew tense. Mike's mother, who had been silent up until this point, spoke up hesitantly. "But why a black child? There are so many other kids who need homes too." The question hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Sarah and Mike had expected this reaction, but it still stung. Their families, though loving, were struggling to accept their decision. But Sarah and Mike remained firm, their conviction unwavering. "We chose him because we believe every child deserves love and a family, no matter their race," Mike said quietly. As the hours passed, Sarah and Mike realized that the conversation wasn't going the way they had hoped. They had come into the meeting excited, eager to share their joy and start this new chapter of their lives. But instead, they were faced with doubt, criticism, and even fear from their own family. Sarah's mother, who had initially seemed just concerned, now couldn't hide the unease in her voice. "You don't know what you're getting into," she said, shaking her head. "Raising a black child in this town? People are going to talk. How will he fit in? It's not going to be easy, Sarah." Mike's father spoke next, his tone filled with worry. "I just don't understand why you'd pick a child from another race. You've already got so much going on. Why put yourself through the challenges that come with adopting someone of a different race?" The questions kept coming. They weren't just about the child. They were about the world Sarah and Mike had chosen to bring him into. Family members questioned how they would deal with the societal judgment, the potential racism their child might face, and whether they truly understood what it meant to raise a child who wasn't just adopted, but also from a different race. Mike's older brother, who had always been the more outspoken member of the family, was less restrained. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Do you realize what you're doing? You're going to bring a black child into a white community? Do you think that's going to be easy for him? For you?" Sarah and Mike were both stunned. They had expected questions, but they hadn't expected such harsh disapproval. The weight of the words pressed down on them. It felt like their world was unraveling. As the evening wore on, the conversation became more heated. Sarah sat quietly, her hands trembling in her lap. She had never imagined her family would react this way. All she had ever wanted was their support. But now every comment, every judgment felt like a blow. Mike, who had always been the calm one, tried to defend their decision. "We know the challenges, but we're not afraid of them. We love him, and that's all that matters." But even his words couldn't ease the tension in the room. The family's reactions were unyielding. Sarah's father, a man of few words, spoke up again. "I just can't support this," he said, his voice cold. "It's not right." And with that, the hurtful words continued to echo through the room. The couple felt the sting of every rejection, each comment a reminder that the people they had once trusted and loved now seemed to be turning their backs on them. As the evening came to a close, Sarah and Mike exchanged a glance. Their hearts were heavy, but they stood firm. They knew they couldn't let their family's disapproval shake their commitment to their son, but the pain of their rejection was undeniable. They had always believed that family was supposed to support you, no matter what. But tonight that belief had been shattered. It wasn't until later that night, after everyone had left, that the final blow came. Mike received a phone call from his mother. "Mike," she began, her voice strained, "we've been talking and we just can't accept this decision. It's too much for us to handle." Sarah's mother followed suit with a phone call of her own. "We can't be part of this, Sarah. I'm sorry, but we can't support you. This is just too far." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Their own parents, the people who had raised them, who had always been there through thick and thin, were now saying they couldn't accept their decision. The family was disowning them, refusing to stand by them as they embarked on this new journey of parenthood. Mike's voice cracked as he responded, "Mom, please, we're doing this because we love this child. He needs us. Why can't you see that?" But the line on the other end went quiet. The silence spoke volumes. "We've made our decision," his mother said coldly. "We can't support this. I'm sorry, Mike." In the days that followed, Sarah and Mike found themselves falling deeper in love with their adopted son, Elijah. It was a love that transcended everything, the judgment, the hurt from their family's rejection, and the uncertainty of the future. They had made a decision, and they would face the challenges together. Sarah would often spend hours in Elijah's nursery, rocking him gently to sleep. She marveled at the way his small hand would grasp her finger, how his eyes would lock onto hers with a quiet trust. Every little smile, every laugh, every moment they spent together filled her heart with joy. Mike, too, found his heart expanding in ways he never imagined possible. He loved watching Elijah's first steps, hearing his first words. They were ordinary milestones for any parent. But to Sarah and Mike, these moments were extraordinary, proof that their love for their son was more than enough to overcome any obstacle. Raising a child was never easy, but with Elijah it felt right. Even on the toughest days, when sleep deprivation took its toll or when the stresses of life felt overwhelming, their bond with their son was the glue that held everything together. Their love for him made all the struggles worthwhile. However, the world outside their home was not so kind. As much as Sarah and Mike tried to focus on their family's happiness, society was quick to remind them of their mistake. At the grocery store, they often found themselves at the center of whispered conversations. People stared at them, some with judgment in their eyes, others with curiosity. Sarah and Mike could feel the weight of the stares. Some individuals even went so far as to approach them with unsolicited comments. One afternoon, while Mike was pushing Elijah in a stroller, an elderly woman stopped him. "Why would you adopt a black child?" she asked bluntly. "There are plenty of white children in need of a home." Mike's fists clenched at his sides, but he kept his composure. "Because he's our son," he said firmly, not allowing the woman to tear them down. "We don't see color, we see love." But not every encounter was so easy to brush off. There were times when Sarah would hear snide comments from strangers when she was out alone with Elijah. Sometimes they weren't even direct. They would simply see the child in her arms and then look away in disdain. Other times, people would talk to her as if she were some kind of charity case. "Must be hard, huh?" one woman remarked, raising an eyebrow. "Adopting someone who doesn't look like you. What were you thinking?" These encounters hurt. They cut deep, especially when they were just trying to live their lives as a family. But Sarah and Mike knew they couldn't let the hatred of strangers destroy their peace. They had to rise above it, for their son, for themselves, and for the example they wanted to set for Elijah. Even though they were united in their love for Elijah, there were times when Sarah and Mike couldn't help but question their decision. Late one night, as they lay in bed, Sarah turned to Mike. "Do you ever wonder if we've made a mistake?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "I mean, sometimes it feels like the whole world is against us." Mike was silent for a moment, staring at the ceiling as he thought about her words. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I just know that I love him. I love him like he's my own flesh and blood. I don't care about what anyone says. But yeah, it's hard sometimes. It's not easy. We knew that." It was a hard truth for them both to face. The doubt was something they had to live with, something that no amount of love could completely erase. But despite the challenges, they clung to the fact that their family was stronger than the judgment of others. There were nights when Sarah would cry alone in her room, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. She felt the pressure of being a mother in a world that was still so divided. But each time Mike was there to hold her, to remind her of why they chose this path in the first place. "I know it's tough," Mike would say, "but we're doing this for him. We're showing him love and acceptance. No one can take that away from us." And with every tear, with every difficult day, they found new reasons to smile. Their love for Elijah was growing stronger each day. The doubts, the fear, and the frustration, they were all part of the journey. But in the end, it was all worth it. The family they were building together was priceless. As the months turned into years, Elijah blossomed under the love and care of Sarah and Mike. From the moment they brought him home, they knew he was a part of their family. His laughter, his curiosity, and his gentle spirit brought so much warmth to their lives. Elijah was growing into a confident, kind, and joyful child. His radiant smile lit up every room he entered. He was a reflection of the unconditional love his parents poured into him, and it was clear to anyone who met him that he was deeply cherished. His accomplishments, whether it was learning how to ride a bike or excelling in school, made Sarah and Mike beam with pride. But it wasn't just Elijah's growth that caught everyone's attention. It was the transformation within Sarah and Mike's hearts. They had become stronger, more resilient, and more confident in their decision. Where once they had doubts about the path they had chosen, they now found themselves fully embraced by the family they had built. They realized that love, more than anything, was what made them a true family. And it wasn't just Sarah and Mike who saw the change. The community, which had once been skeptical, began to take notice. People who had been quick to judge now saw the joy and stability in the couple's home. The couple wasn't just raising a child. They were creating an example of love and acceptance that defied prejudice. The transformation wasn't just about Elijah. It was about everyone learning that love knows no boundaries, no color, no limits. It started with small gestures, a phone call from Sarah's sister Rachel, who had been one of the most vocal critics of their decision. "I saw Elijah at the park today," Rachel said, her voice softer than before. "He's so happy, Sarah. I'm glad you've got him." It was a simple admission, but it meant the world. Sarah could hear the change in her sister's tone, the understanding beginning to take root. Rachel was starting to see what Sarah and Mike had known all along. Elijah was a part of their family, just as much as anyone else. A few weeks later, Sarah received a text from her mother, one she never thought she would get. "I miss you, Sarah. I've been thinking about Elijah. I want to see him." That was the first step. It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. The walls that had been built between Sarah and her family were starting to crumble piece by piece. It wasn't long before the extended family reached out as well. Invitations to family gatherings that had once been void of their presence began to arrive. The shift was subtle, but it was undeniable. Sarah and Mike were hesitant at first, unsure if they were ready to trust the family who had rejected them so harshly. But they couldn't deny the joy in seeing Elijah's grandparents, uncles, and aunts embrace him. There was a sense of healing in the air, a feeling that, despite everything, love was mending the brokenness that had once torn them apart. At a family dinner one evening, Sarah's father, who had been one of the most resistant to the idea of adoption, looked at Elijah with a softened gaze. "You're a good boy, Elijah," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Your parents have done a great job with you." It was more than just words. It was the beginning of reconciliation, a realization that perhaps they had been wrong in their initial judgment. The love and care that Sarah and Mike had shown Elijah had not only changed their own lives, but it was starting to change the hearts of the very people who had once turned their backs on them. The love they had for Elijah was contagious. It spread beyond the walls of their home, touching the hearts of family members who had once been blinded by ignorance. Slowly they began to understand that the decision Sarah and Mike had made was not about color. It was about love. And that love had created a family stronger than anything they had ever imagined. Months had passed since Sarah and Mike had begun rebuilding their lives after the rejection. The pain of losing their family had softened, but the scars still lingered. They had come to accept that they could continue without their family's approval, but the desire for reconciliation had always remained. Then, one evening, out of the blue, Sarah's phone rang. The familiar ringtone echoed through the quiet house, and Sarah froze when she saw the caller ID, her mother. "Mom?" Sarah answered, her voice cautious but hopeful. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," her mother's voice came through, shaky and filled with emotion. We've been thinking a lot about what happened. I've been thinking about Elijah. You and Mike. You made the right choice. And I was wrong. We were wrong." The words felt like a weight lifting off Sarah's shoulders. For months she had waited for this moment, never knowing if it would come. Her mother continued, "I want to apologize for how we treated you, for turning our backs on you. I want to meet Elijah, and I want to be a part of your life again. We were blinded by our own ignorance and fear. I see now what you saw all along, that love is what matters." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she took in every word. The apology she had longed for was finally here. Her mother wasn't just asking for forgiveness. She was acknowledging the mistake, the hurt she had caused, and the love that had been lost in the process. "Mom, I don't know what to say." "We've been waiting for this," Sarah replied, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and emotion. "We never wanted to lose you, but we've built a family, and that's all that matters now." The following weekend, Sarah and Mike invited her parents over for the first time in what felt like forever. They were both nervous and excited, unsure of what to expect after so much time apart. But when the doorbell rang and they opened the door to see Sarah's parents standing there, a flood of emotions hit them all at once. The moment was surreal. Her father, who had once stood firm in his disapproval, was now holding out his arms, his eyes filled with tears. "Can I hug my grandson?" he asked softly. Elijah, sensing the sincerity in his grandfather's voice, stepped forward cautiously and, without hesitation, wrapped his arms around him. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. Elijah was welcoming his family back, ready to forgive, ready to move forward. His embrace melted any remaining tension in the room. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks as she watched her father hold Elijah. Mike squeezed her hand, both of them overwhelmed by the scene unfolding before them. The love that had been missing for so long was finally being rekindled. They all gathered around the dining table, where Sarah's mother carefully set down a plate of homemade food, a symbol of her desire to rebuild the bond. As they sat together, there were no harsh words, no accusations, just a quiet acknowledgement that they had all been wrong in some way, but that they were willing to heal. "I can't believe how much he's grown," Sarah's mother said, looking at Elijah with a newfound appreciation. "He's such a bright, loving child. I see now why you chose to adopt him." Elijah, with his innocent yet knowing smile, responded, "I'm glad you came. I've been waiting for you." As time passed, the relationship between Sarah, Mike, and their family continued to evolve. What started as a painful rift slowly transformed into a deeper connection, one forged through understanding and mutual respect. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but their bond grew stronger with each passing day. The family began to spend more time together, attending family gatherings, and making an effort to create new memories. They no longer saw Elijah as just Sarah and Mike's adopted child. They saw him as a beloved grandson, nephew, and cousin. The walls of prejudice and judgment that once stood between them were gradually broken down, piece by piece. Sarah's parents would come over every weekend, eagerly watching Elijah grow and learn new things. His laughter echoed through the house, a reminder of how far they had come. The once silent moments during family dinners had been replaced with lively conversations and shared experiences. At times, Sarah and Mike would look at each other, amazed by how things had changed. They had feared they would never be able to rebuild what was broken, but now they knew that the foundation of their family was stronger than ever. Love had prevailed. The story ends with a simple but profound moment. Sarah, Mike, and Elijah sitting together on the porch as the sun set in the distance. The warmth of the setting sun mirrored the warmth they now felt within their hearts. Elijah had grown into a compassionate and wise young boy, and his parents were more in love with him than they had ever imagined. A soft breeze blew through the trees as Sarah wrapped her arms around Mike, their fingers intertwined. Elijah ran around the yard, his joy infectious. They watched him, knowing that they had done the right thing. The family they had created was beautiful, not because of the blood that ran through their veins, but because of the love that flowed between them. The camera pulls back, showing the family in the soft golden light of the evening. The message is clear. Family is not about genetics. It's about love, compassion, and standing together in the face of adversity. As the screen fades to black, a final message appears. True family is built on love, not blood. Love conquers all. Conquers